Thank you for joining LiGO workshop today. The topic is how to get the most out of LiGO reporting. These workshops are meant to be educational, so we're focusing on educational aspects of LiGO. So the agenda today is we're going to be covering a brief overview of LiGO, an overview of the LiGO reporting and some of the reports that are available, how to create reports, setting up some things to optimize the reports with things such as tags and permissions, also scheduling emails, and some best practices with regards to setting up your reports. So there's a variety of best practices with reports and how to get the most out of your reporting, as well as some things such as ad hoc reports and being able to run ad hoc reports and custom reports. And then we'll end with questions and answers at the end. So just a brief overview of LiGO itself. It's a web-based interface that allows you to log in anywhere from any device. You'll be able to see your vehicles in the vehicle list as well as vehicles on the map that are labeled based on your vehicle name. You can also see tracks, so you can see historical tracks. So this is another form of reporting in that you can go back in time and view exactly where the vehicles have been and their tracks. We also have the concept of events, so you have historical data of where the vehicles have been, but you also have this, this is another type of reporting in that there's events and alerts that can be either sent via SMS, email, as well as visually seen on the map. So you can see things such as harsh driving, speeding, going outside of a boundary, other types of events that are available that can notify the end user of any type of events that are occurring in the system. There's also concept of a geofence or boundaries, so you can define boundaries so they can be, if you want to capture information in those reports of time spent, for example, within these boundaries, and those boundaries could be, for example, neighborhoods, they could be district boundaries. In this case, what you're seeing is parks, so identifying time spent within parks, so you can capture the reporting information can be inside these boundaries, or they could be also outside the boundaries. So they could be, for example, you have a service boundary, you have a city boundary, and you want to essentially know the time and exactly when they left that boundary. You can get that as well based on these boundaries that are defined. Other types of reports that are available are related to perhaps the vehicles themselves. So you can have maintenance essentially be notified and get, one is notifications when vehicles are due for maintenance, and those can be based on miles, odometer, engine hours, and those sort of things. And also you can actually have reports that are associated with this of when you actually do some of the maintenance on those vehicles as well. In terms of accessing the reports, they're available in the Reports drop-down menu. You'll have a variety of out-of-the-box reports, but some of the things we're going to cover today is actually how you can create new reports in your list. So you're not limited to just perhaps the list of reports that you have in your drop-down menu. You can actually create and add additional reports yourself under the Manage Reports, which we'll cover in more detail. So these reports can be in a variety of formats, and they can come to you via email, or you can run them yourself. And you can also schedule these reports, which again we'll be covering in more detail, real specifically to who they go to, what time of day that they're generated, and so forth. So within LiGO, there's a lot of different reporting options. There's real-time sort of reports that you can see, things that are going on right now, whether they be events, the vehicles, alerts that are happening. You also have access to historical tracks and track points, and those historical tracks can be event-driven, meaning that you can actually see, for example, where a vehicle has swept. Maybe a street sweeper has actually swept. So broom down versus broom up driving. And then, as I mentioned, we have predefined reports. So you'll see in LiGO you have a drop-down of reports. You can run ad hoc reports, meaning that you can essentially define the query parameters of your reports, being any specific times that you want, custom times. You can also pick specific events that you want to run the report on, or specific tags as well, which we'll be covering a little bit coming up here. And then you don't necessarily even need to go into LiGO to get some of these reports. You can schedule these reports, and so they just go essentially right into your inbox and are available to supervisors without even necessarily getting into the system to run the reports. And as well as custom reports, you can essentially define and create your own custom reports. So here's some example the reports that are available that you should have out of the box, things such as trip and idle reports, time on site, vehicle utilization, speeding, harsh driving, productivity reports, as well as some others. Some of these reports in your drop-down menu, you can set them to different time frames, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, in the list. So here's an example of a vehicle utilization. This is a handy report especially for a fleet group that's looking at potentially purchasing vehicles. This gives you a quick way to see perhaps some vehicles that are maybe underutilized, that perhaps you don't necessarily need to purchase some vehicles. On the flip side, you can also see maybe where vehicles are getting overly utilized and perhaps need to come in for service. You have linear event reports. So example again is street sweeping. So you have the nice thing about most of these reports is you have not only the report themselves, but you also have links to the map. So you have an associated map. So in this case, you see we're capturing information where the broom is down. You're able to see where work is being done there, versus the gray lines are actually where they're just driving. And so with this, along with this, is we have the smart tracking that gives accurate tracking. And this helps, of course, with your reporting, because with accurate tracks, you have better information on perhaps you're wanting to get reports on distance swept. So having accurate tracks really helps with your reporting options there. Other types of reports are things such as time on site. So you want to know how much time vehicles are spending at locations, and these sites could be facilities or buildings, they could be assets. So you can capture time automatically, and these sort of reports give you information on arrival time, departure, total time and duration on site automatically. So again, very useful for capturing time versus handwriting information. So you have other things that you'll see on your map that are considered a form of reporting, in that you have alerts where you have maybe idling events, speeding events, and these sort of reports are sort of real time, but you can also go back and view those historically down on the events tab and view those reports from that standpoint. So there's real-time information, but all this information is also in reports that you can have these run. So you have a variety. The point here is you can have really a variety of ways of getting reports, whether they be going into the system and viewing them, or getting them in a actual report format that's either emailed to you, or you can run those based on any period of time. Here's again a boundary or a geofence. This is one where it's going outside of the service area, and you're wanting to know how much time they're spending outside of that area. And again, as I mentioned, they have the reports have these little links where you can go from the report itself to the map. So, for example, right here is next to 930. When you click that, you see exactly where they left the boundary, and you can see this circle up here that gives 2-minute stop just north of that area. So really helpful information both from the report and then the visual map sense of that. So that's just a little bit of overview of the reporting capabilities. Now we're going to get into some of the details here of the report. So as I mentioned, you will have some drop down in your reports drop down menu. You'll have a list of reports, and there's this managed reports. This is really where you're able to create reports or modify existing reports, is under managed reports. And so you'll see again a list of reports. You have the options to edit existing ones or remove existing ones. And then down below there's these report definitions. So this is where you can really create your own reports and define the parameters of those, whether it be I want a weekly report for every time they're outside of a geofence, or a daily report, are all under these report definitions that you can add yourself. Before you get into actually creating reports, there's some things to consider with reporting. Some of the best practices when you're creating these reports are, for example, you don't want to leave fields blank in the report. So in other words, you really want to pick the time frame. You want to pick the who it's associated with. You know, in other words, which vehicles that you're wanting to run the report on, as well as you're wanting to pick the event. So you want to pick those and make sure it's all filled out, because otherwise these things run and then it's not running on the complete set. The other thing to consider is tags and roles and rules, event rules. So in other words, you can, if you're wanting to run reports, you may want to really narrow it down to specific, in other words, subsets of vehicles. Another item is being sure to set a time period. The best thing to do is actually picking time periods that are not today but previous days or previous weeks. The reason for this is when you set these reports up, the nice thing is our system automatically basically caches those reports for you. So in other words, once it's set up, it actually processes that data behind the scenes. And so then when you go to run the report, it's really fast, and it just essentially takes data that's already processed based on the reports that you've defined. So keep that in mind. If you're running something, you can always do a report for today. That's not a problem. It's just be aware that that data has not been processed. It's going to run a process right there and do that. The other thing is hiding parameters from the end users. So meaning you have the ability to hide some of the fields, so that hide some of the fields from them, and it'll explain that in a little bit more detail coming up here. And then, of course, if you have large reports, so if you're looking at monthly reports, you know, large utilization reports, or even a custom report, let's say a quarter or annual report, best thing with those is really to set those up on a schedule. And that really is going to help performance. That way you're not running it right there. It's essentially just sent to your email box. So this is explaining what I'm talking about here. So the next thing is so for example, not leaving fields blank. When you define your reports, you don't want to leave a field like this. For example, the event rule. An event rule could again be an idling event rule, or a speeding event rule, or a geofence event rule. So you want to pick that when you're defining your reports. You want to make sure you set all of these fields. And here's the list of fields. There's, again, you set the time period that you want, the event rules and tags. You can also define the format down below. So it could be a CSV, a PDF, HTML, a zip file. So you can predefine essentially what it is in the format there. As I mentioned before, the tags. The tags are really under this tags option here, and when I'm talking about tags, those are associated with specific vehicles. So, for example, I'll be showing you. We have some groups. They have a water department, they have a parks department, they have a fire department, and they only want to see reports that are just associated with their vehicle. So that's really where you set up tags, and then you pick those specific tag, maybe fire or water, and then they're only getting, it's only running on their subset of data there. As I mentioned before, the time period is important. So the best thing if you're setting these is to set these for example, the week before or the day before. And then what it'll do is it'll run that data beforehand and basically process that data. It's all ready for you when you run the report. Hiding parameters. So this is what I was referring to when I say hiding some of the parameters. So when you go to manage reports and you pick a specific report, you have the option of checking whether you want to hide some of these fields. So you may want to, for example, speeding reports, you just can essentially define the name of that. So let's say you want a speeding report that's daily. All you really want to do is maybe offer the end user the daily option to choose the time period, but they probably don't need to see, the specific event rule, which in this case is a speeding limit rule. You can uncheck that and then uncheck the tags, because you're already defining sort of what it's associated with. And this is what it looks like down here before you actually run the report. All they're going to see is, for example, the daily in which they can pick the specific days there. So you have the flexibility of essentially removing any of the parameters that they can do to run the report on their side. So the next thing is, really I think one of the key things is scheduling those reports, and especially if they're large. They're either large quantities, maybe on all the vehicles, or it's on a period of time that's, for example, a month or a quarter or a year. It's a good thing to set these up on a schedule. And to do that, you just go to Manage Reports, and then next to the report, you just pick the one that you want to edit. And when you click Edit, then it'll bring up this Report Settings window down here on the bottom. And here's where you can choose, again, the specific parameters, but you check this over to the far right. There's email schedule, and that's where you set that up on a schedule. And I'll show you how that works here in a minute. In terms of tags, setting up some of the tags, so that's under the admin section here. And what a tag does is it essentially you pick the specific vehicles that you want to be in that tag, so that, again, events, views, reports, all those sort of things can just show those specific vehicles in the report. So you just go up here in the upper right, hit Add New Tag, and then you essentially pick the specific vehicles that are associated with that tag. And then once you have the tag set up and you have your reports defined, what you can do is you can define what permissions the end user has to be able to see certain reports. So under the roles option, there's a roles. There's this report section, and you can define what specific reports they can see, view, whether they can create reports, what specific reports. So I'll show you in a minute an example of how a customer is using this to really define for each one of their groups the different levels of permissions that they have of what they can do with their reporting capabilities here under this permissions roles section. So this is another concept. So we've been talking a lot about actually how to create reports, but you can also, in the events themselves, you can also set up automatic reports. And then what that means is if you want immediate notification of an event occurring, instead of, for example, running, I just want to know what happened for the week, I want to know something that happened immediately at the instance that it happened. And that's done under the event rule itself. So, for example, if you're wanting to know any of the vehicles that go over 75 miles per hour, in that event rule, you can set up a notification in that event rule to essentially be emailed immediately when that event occurs. So what you do is, and again, it's dependent on the type of event you're working with, whether it be a geofence event or other events. But once you have that set up, then you pick under notification, you select email option, and then going back to that tag section that I talked about, you can have specific users that are also part of that tag that will receive those notifications. So that's just another type of report if you need an immediate notification. That can be done as well within the system versus having, say, a report that's run daily, weekly, monthly. So this is customizing the reports. So to customize the reports, this is where you go down to that reports definition section that's in the managed reports. A lot of times the one report that's used frequently, and it's sort of an ad hoc report, is event rule report. That gives you the ability to essentially combine event rules or use any sort of event rules. So for example, one customer uses, they combine their geofence events with their idling. So they can basically have a report that shows them the amount of idle time within a boundary, and it could be a district or a neighborhood or those sort of things. So that's a nice thing about this ad hoc event rule report, is you can sort of combine event rules and then pick specific tags with that. It's just called the event rule option, and you just pick that in the drop-down menu in your reports definition, and then just essentially pick the specific rules and tags that you want associated with that. And it looks something like this. For example, event rule. This is event rule with distance here as an example. So I am going to pop over to the demonstration here. Okay, so this is the LiGO interface here. You can of course see information live in terms of vehicles moving. You can access information down here on specific events that are occurring at any given time. So for example, speeding events here, you can see those sort of as a real-time view of reports. You can view that information down here as historical data. The other thing is that you can view historical tracks of these. So I can right-click and, for example, draw today's track and get a view of that track for the day, for example, and seeing where they went. So these are sort of ways for, it's a different type of reporting, but it's a reporting in that you're wanting to see where the vehicle went. And you can view, for example, the replay option to be able to see exactly where the vehicle has driven. So this gives you a way you can actually grab it and move that. So that's sort of more of a visual way of reporting the information versus getting it in an actual report format. But I just wanted to show you that. And of course, you have detailed information here about the tracks down to, real detailed level, exactly where the points are down here as well, that you can export that data out. But let's look at some of the reporting options here. So under reports, as you can see, we've got a list of reports here, and you can see I've got idling report daily. I've got a idling report weekly, and a lot of these reports, they had some initial reports that were out of the box, but they created their own reports, and so they can run these at any given time. So let's say I run this geofence report. I just pick that. I can, of course, pick my time period that I'm interested in. It's set, the default is weekly here. These are actually showing, but I could hide these. I could pick the format, the different format that I want. But I'm going to go ahead and generate this. So this is essentially running a report that's sort of predefined for me in my drop-down list. And as you can see here, it's giving me information about the individual vehicles and where the geofence violations have occurred. So I can click on for example, this link over here, and over on the map, it shows the location of where the vehicle went outside of the boundary there. If I can come in here and actually show the boundary itself and give you an idea of where specifically they went outside of that boundary, so I can see here at that location. So it gives me a sort of link between the report and the map itself, and it gives me some detailed information exactly when they left the geofence, how much the duration that they were, address information, etc. And also, for example, the distance. And this particular customer, they actually have, they're using driver ID technology, so meaning they have, this particular customer has 50 vehicles but 180 employees, and they essentially check out vehicles. So they want to know, you know, what specific driver was driving the vehicle at that time. So it gives driver information as well as the the vehicle name itself, for example. So again, under the reporting section, you have these lists of reports, and if I come in here and go to Manage Reports, we'll see all of these reports now that are here, where I could go in and edit some of the predefined information here. So, for example, if we just go to this geofence violation by Vehicle Weekly, and I come in here and click Edit, this brings the information. So I can change the description of that on the report. I can change information that's displayed on the report in this report settings. I can also change the format of the report if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I can uncheck so it actually doesn't show these parameters. I can pick my time period that I'm interested in right here. As you noticed, when I ran the report, none of these things are hidden, but if I wanted to hide some of these things, I could just check these and I could actually hide it from the interface, and it's real straightforward. So, for example, I can pick that, and I can pick that, and then save this. And then if I come back here and now look at this report option for geofence violation, before, as you remember, I could see that information. Now it's not showing me that. So it's that simple of just basically changing the parameters that are displayed to the end user there. And again, you can hide, this information can be hidden as well, so the end users don't necessarily need to see the the managed reports option. It's only maybe an administrator that's allowed to actually change these, so just keep that in mind, that permissions can be set, that someone can actually create or modify these based on their permission. But if we go back to managed reports again, some of the other things you can do with this is if we come in here and go to edit, we can set that to be on a schedule. So notice that right now it's not checked, but if I wanted this, instead of coming in here and actually running this, I could simply come in and select email schedule, and I can, these are all the parameters that I can set for this. And again, this really helps for, say, larger types of reports that you're wanting to set up to, again, automatically be sent to specific users just to save time and, of course, not having to wait to actually run the report. You just basically get them in your inbox. But all you have to do is pick, for example, the days of the week that you want the report to be sent to you, which specific day. So maybe it's every Friday, and I want it to be, I get in at 6 a.m., so I want it at 6 a.m. The recipients, so again, based on those tags that I mentioned earlier, this is important, and we'll cover that in a second. But you pick a tag, and then that tag, whoever's in that tag will be the ones that receives those emails, the emailed reports. And then you can also make it so that if there's no data, so in other words, if there was no geofence violations this week, I don't want to receive a report. So you just say no here, and then you wouldn't get a report. But if you say yes and there's no violations, you basically get an empty report essentially. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you set that up, and then you save that there. Let me pop over to another application where, let's see, go to this one here. So this particular one has, it has a variety of different departments. Of course, I'm an administrator, so I can see all of the reports. But for each of the supervisors of these different departments, when they log in, for example, the traffic, all they see is traffic-related reports. They don't actually see all the other ones in the list. So I'm, of course, an administrator, so I'm able to see water traffic. But you notice here there's water traffic. And the way those are defined are based on those tags that I mentioned. So if we come up here and go to admin, we go to tag, you notice there's tags for each one. So there's a traffic tag, and this traffic tag is going to be just basically picking the specific traffic-related vehicles there. And then same with water. There's just the water tag only has specific vehicles for that tag. So those are key with the reporting option that you see here. So only, again, the water is going to be just run on the water vehicles. The traffic's just run on the traffic vehicles. The other thing that I mentioned in the PowerPoint is those permissions that you can set. So one of the things we can work with you on is setting up permissions. So, for example, different levels of permission. You may have a traffic administrator that actually is the person that creates the reports and creates the roles, whereas you have a traffic operator that's the end user, and even a traffic vehicle only, where all they can see is maybe it's a dispatch center that's seeing just the live vehicles. So you have these different sort of roles that you can easily define in here. And then if we pull up one of these existing ones, I just want to give you an idea of how we can set the permissions for this particular role. So again, there's users that are defined in that role, and then each one of those that are part of that role will only be able to see certain reports when they log into the system. So, for example, if we go down here to view reports, as part of that role, all they're going to be seeing are these traffic-related reports that are defined for them. Whereas, again, if we pick water, they're going to be seeing the water-related reports only. And also, you may have certain roles where you don't want them to actually be able to create reports as well, so you can uncheck those, and you can it's really flexible in terms of, narrowing down the permissions that they have that's associated with those. So that's just wanted to give you an idea of, that's a key thing. If you're, rather than running a complete report on all the vehicles, you may want to think about how you can, specific groups of users need to see specific reports only, and that's how you can define those, is with those tags and roles. So one other thing that I want to show here too is just to give you an idea of where we can get down to. Again, part of it is what we're capturing or what you want to capture, and how we can report that. So, for example, we can connect up to any of your onboard systems onto your vehicles that you have, and we can report on that information, not only where it's driving, and not only the driver that's driving the vehicle, but also what the vehicle is actually doing in terms of work. So in this case, this is an example of where we have street sweeping, and you have, you know, where the broom is actually down is the dark brown here, whereas the lighter brown is just driving. So again, the key thing here is accurate tracks gives you better reporting. So that's part of what we're offering here in our smart tracking is these accurate tracking capabilities that can then give you better reporting information. So we'll come up here and so again, based on some of the report capabilities here, so let's just take sweeper reports summary report here. I'll run this. And then I'm interested in maybe a specific day, so I can go back in time, and I can pick that day, and then I can generate that. And so that is generating. One key thing is after you generate a report, notice there's also a send email. So besides setting up these on a schedule, you can also basically set these up to be, after you run the report, you can send this report or you can print this report. So there's options here. So I can go ahead and, for example, send this report here to myself, and it'll be sent off to a person that you can enter that information in there. Another report is, for example, pick another one. Let's pick, for example, this particular customer, they want to know the amount of time spent in the dump zone. So that's, again, related to a geofence. The other one we showed was going outside of the geofence boundary. This one, the supervisor wants to know when they're spending more than an hour within the dump zone. And they basically get these reports sent to them on a daily basis, the supervisor, to know how much time they're spending in these dump zones, because they could be doing different things like, drinking a Coke or smoking cigarettes or whatever. So this gives a breakdown, for example, of each vehicle and how much time they're spending in the dump zone here on a daily basis. And so this information can be automatically sent into your inbox. This is just an example of one that we have set up where this information is coming into an email inbox, and those can be, again, automatically sent. And they could be alerts, or they can be so these can be just alerts notifying of things that are happening, or they can be actual reports themselves. So the alerts are, again, those alerts are set up in the event rules, but you could also get these reports sent in a variety of formats. So this is an HTML format that's coming in my inbox, but it could be a PDF or another option as well that's coming in the inbox. So just looking at where I mentioned about setting up those automatic alerts, those are under event rules here. And so, for example, if I wanted an immediate notification, for example, let's just pick idling here. I can come down here and set a notification here. So under notification, if I wanted an additional notification here, I can pick, for example, I want an email notification, and that's going to be automatically sent. And then I would just basically pick the recipient. So, for example, you can have a tag that's an email group here. They're going to be the ones that receive this. And then I can pick my essentially my topic that's going to be sent. So it could be idle time. You want to put the actual idle amount, total idle time here. And then I could put a message as well. So I could put a subject line here and say something along those lines. So there's flexibility in terms of how you set up those notifications. But what this is, the idea of this is it's an automatic email when the event occurs, and it gets sent into the inbox from the event. So a lot of different options of how you get reports, whether they be almost real time or they be just set up on one of those schedules where you're getting those more on a scheduled basis. The thing I mentioned earlier about actually running for example, an ad hoc report. Let me go back to one of my others here. So let's go Manage Reports. Under my Manage Reports here, I want to pick a specific one. So as I mentioned, Event Rule is a common one. So if I pick Event Rule, I can then open this. And notice the list of reports that I have right now in my list here. I can open this, and then what I want to do is I want to actually pick and define a specific one. So let's say I want to have an idling event, and I want it to be just for the water department, and I want it to be a weekly event that occurs. And so what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to change this to water idling to weekly report, and then I could spell out the description of this. This is a idling report for water vehicles or something along those lines. Again, I could choose the format that I want. I want to hide certain things, like I'm gonna go ahead and hide this water, and I'm going to hide the idle here and just leave that open. And then I'm going to save this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and now there's going to be a new, when we go back under our reporting drop-down menu, you'll see a new report, and that new report will be water idling to weekly. And so and that's I don't know how much, but if we go ahead and run this, and again, as I mentioned, one of the key things is since we just now created this report, it's running the process. But if you create these reports ahead of time, by the next day, what our system does is it actually processes the data for you. And then that way, when you come in and run the report, it runs fast because the data is essentially already processed based on the report that you've defined. We just went ahead and just created this report definition just now. So it's running this basically new because this is a brand new report we just generated. But this gives you the idea of how simple it is essentially to create a new report based on your rules and parameters that you have set up, event rules and specific tags. So not sure how much idling is going to be in this, but we'll find out here in just a second. And so there's our idling report for water, and gives you the list of options here. So that's how simple that is in terms of creating a new report. And that's just one option, of course, in the managed reports. So if you see here, there's other ones that are available, and we can actually add additional. So this particular customer only has certain reports. We can actually add additional report definitions in this list for you, depending on what you're doing. But if you decide that this report is not for you, you can come in here and basically delete this. And all it's doing is it's just removing it from your drop-down list that you have. So, so that report's now gone. It's not in the drop-down list anymore. But of course, I could go and create that again. So that's real straightforward in terms of how you can create and generate work orders, or I'm sorry, generate reports. So I want to be able to make sure I have time for questions. So I'm going to come back to our PowerPoint here and just sort of summarize. So basically, reporting is a key thing, and it really is the key thing with LiGO is that you can benefit from these reports, and there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you generate the reports and defining the reports. Getting the right report for the right person is key. So just in terms of, again, we can set those tags up that you can get reports sent to specific supervisors or certain groups. Rather than running it on all vehicles, there's really flexibility in terms of defining who they go to which person. Having the reports and having that information provides for better operations, a better view of operations of what's going on in your system. And it helps with your metrics to manage. So, for example, the tracks that you see, the historical tracks, is going to maybe help with routing, or things such as the geofence that's going to help with different things, or speeding. So all this information, the reporting is the key for basically improving operations. You can get information. This information can actually be sent over and auto-populating some of your other business systems as well. We didn't really cover that too much, but this data can be sent over via our LiGO access to your other business systems, where maybe you're doing reports in those systems, such as perhaps Lucity or CityWorks or other business systems that you're using, and you're wanting to leverage data that's being captured automatically in LiGO to into your other systems. And so one of the the key things is this is a hosted system, and it's really straightforward, as you saw, to be able to create some of this and define some of these yourself without having to ask someone to create the report for you and take a week to get it. You can literally come in here and do this yourself and get a report done. We, of course, can help you. We understand. So when we work with you, we'll work through some of these in more detail on some of the training on how to do this, but this is sort of an overview of some of the flexibilities of how you can do some of this reporting yourself, create reports yourself. You don't have to necessarily rely on Marshall for creating new reports, and you don't have to rely on some of your, maybe your IT staff to do some of these too. Okay, well, here's my contact information here. You can contact me directly. Rhett Harmon, I'm the delivery service manager here. You can email me, you can call me and ask me questions directly about some of these things, about the reporting, and I'd be happy to get into some more details on how to create reports and utilize the reporting capabilities within LiGO. All right, thank you everybody for attending our LiGO workshop, and we look forward to future ones, and just keep an eye out for notification here next month for our next webinar. Thank you for your time.